One race, 6 cars, one big embarrassment for Formula One. There has been many controversial moments over the years in Formula One's 75-year history that has put the sport into shame for all the wrong reasons. We've had it all: Crashgate, Spygate, team orders. Controversial moments are just part of the business. One of those controversies happened right here, on this day, 20 years ago, in what has to go down simply as the strangest, most farcical race that there has ever been in Formula One. And it happened all because of one reason. In a season that marked a changing of the guard and gave us a new world champion for the first time since 1999, this race could have easily have torn Formula One apart and overshadowed what was a brilliant championship. Fortunately, it didn't. Formula One did what it does best and made sure that this never ever happened again. If you haven't guessed it already, this is the story of the 2005 US Grand Prix. So how did it come down to this? How and why did this race become the most embarrassing race in F1 history that almost killed Formula One in America? Well, let's get into it. The US Grand Prix was the 9th round of the 2005 season, held at the iconic Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Indy had become the home of Formula One in America. After years of the sport trying to make it big in the US, it felt like it had finally found a permanent venue that would remain for years and years to come. In the 8 races so far, like I indicated a little earlier on, we had seen quite a different season to previous years. This was mainly down to rule changes brought in to stop Ferrari's dominant streak, after it had literally strolled to both titles in 2004. The most significant change was the banning of tyre changes at pit stops, something which caught out Bridgestone, who supplied tyres to Ferrari, as they had designed tyres for shorter stints in between fuel stops. This meant that after 5 successive World Championships, Michael Schumacher's run looked as though it would be coming to an end. At this stage, he was 35 points behind Renault's Fernando Alonso, who had been the class of the field so far that season, and looked destined to become world champion for the first time. He'd not had it all his own way, but Alonso's consistency was the reason why he'd built such a comfortable advantage in the standings. McLaren actually had the faster package compared to Renault, but reliability had been their Achilles heel in 2005, costing them crucial points in the title battle. Kimi Raikkonen had arguably been as impressive as Alonso, but his car had let him down too many times in winning positions. But there was still more than half the season to go, so there was plenty more opportunities for Kimi to close that points buffer, starting with Indy. But all thought of if McLaren could start mounting a comeback and starting to close the gap to Renault was quickly forgotten about, because a bigger story was brewing. As practice began on Friday, Toyota suffered identical accidents with 2 of its cars. Ralf Schumacher had a major crash at the final corner that was very similar to the one that he'd had the year before at the same part of the track, that broke his back and put him out for 6 races. He'd walked away, but Ralf wouldn't drive again that weekend, and so was replaced by Toyota's test driver Ricardo Zonta. A left rear tyre failure was the cause of Ralf's accident, and ironically Zonta would have a similar failure, only this time in the infield section where he simply spun off into the gravel. What was going on? It's not uncommon for there to be tyre failures, but it was a big concern. The 2 had happened in such a short space of time, and both had been a result of a left rear tyre failure on Michelin tyres. Was the banked final corner putting too much stress on the Michelin tyres that they simply could not cope with the excessive loads? The banking had been resurfaced since the 2004 race, which during testing for the Indy 500 a month earlier was found to have made tyre wear higher than usual. Grooves were cut into the surface to try and ease this problem. Bridgestone had decided to be more conservative with its tyre choice, but Michelin, on the other hand, had been caught out. Michelin could not understand why its tyres were failing, so they decided to fly in a different specification of tyre to see if that could resolve the problem. But it didn't. At that point, Michelin gave a worrying statement, where they said that unless something could be done to slow the cars down in that final corner on the banking at turn 13, they could not guarantee that their tyres could do more than 10 laps, and more than half the teams on the grid were supplied by Michelin. This meant that 14 out of the 20 cars on the grid were at risk of suffering a tyre failure unless something could be done to limit that risk. A crisis meeting took place on the morning of the race between the teams and the drivers to discuss ways that they could slow the cars down, and 3 solutions were put forward. They were to either limit the speed of the Michelin teams in the final corner, mandate them to pit every 10 laps, or simply add a chicane at turn 13. They quickly agreed that adding a chicane was the best option, so they began planning how this could be installed. But for this to go ahead, all 10 teams needed to unanimously agree. But one team had chosen not to accept this proposal: Ferrari. Scrounging around for ideas, there was even talk of making this a non-championship event, but that was quickly refuted by the then FIA president Max Mosley. So confusion reigned before the start of the race. Would the race go ahead? Would a chicane be installed? Would the Michelin teams race? Minardi boss Paul Stoddart may have had nothing to worry about with his team running Bridgestone tyres, but he was more worried about the potential consequences for the sport. He made it abundantly clear that a solution needed to be found, otherwise F1's reputation in America would be in tatters. Martin Brundle pretty much summed up the whole situation on his grid walk before he went on to grill Bernie Ecclestone about what was going on, when he said, "I don't know whether to laugh or cry, to be honest. It's just complete lunacy." And it was. We were minutes away from the start, and watching on TV, we literally had no idea what was going to happen. It was a complete shambles. All the cars left the grid on the formation lap, going through the normal motions and procedures. Were we going to get a race, or was this about to be F1's worst nightmare? We soon got our answer as they neared the pit entry. The 7 Michelin teams began clearing spaces in their garages, confirming everyone's worst fears. They would not be racing. Only the 2 Ferraris, 2 Jordans and 2 Minardis lined up on the grid in the strangest, most bizarre sight, and the 130,000 capacity crowd could not believe their eyes. As the race got going, the fans did not waste their time showing their displeasure, with boos ringing around the circuit. It was a disaster. That was just the start though, as some began throwing beer cans onto the track. Others left the track early in protest. Banners with specific messages on them were waved, and many demanded that they should be refunded. As for the race itself, as you can probably imagine, it was largely uneventful, with most of the coverage being focused on the crowd's antics in the grandstands and interviewing team principals and drivers that weren't racing as to what they thought of the whole situation. All of the 6 cars did make it to the end, with Schumacher coming out on top, leading home his teammate Barrichello and Montero's Jordan. Michael and Rubens actually nearly collided when they were battling for the lead, as Michael came out from his last pit stop and met Barrichello at the first corner, and Barrichello actually had to go onto the grass to avoid a collision. That would have been extremely embarrassing and completely unnecessary, considering that they were a lap ahead and had a 1-2 finish in the bag. Of course, Jordan and Minardi managed to get their first points of the season, but Stoddart took absolutely no pleasure in the result, despite the fact that his team had scored some much welcome points. He actually delivered an expletive rant to Dutch TV during the middle of the race, where he called the whole event fucking crazy and effectively told the FIA to get a grip of itself, otherwise Formula 1 was heading in the wrong direction. Schumacher and Barrichello looked embarrassed standing on the podium and didn't even bother to stick around for the celebrations, simply picking up their trophies and walking off, leaving Montero to celebrate his maiden podium alone, which, in a way, you could not blame him for doing so, because a result like this was never going to happen on merit. Interestingly, it was also noticed that Schumacher chose to wear a Bridgestone cap instead of his Ferrari cap in the post-race press conference, as a way of making it clear that they were not to blame for this farce. The future of Formula 1 in America was now under serious threat, just as it looked as though it had found a permanent home in the US. Everything that it had worked towards had now crashed and burned in just one instance, and Formula 1 would only end up racing at Indianapolis only twice more before it dropped off the calendar entirely. It was the same for Michelin. Their future now looked bleak. They had been a great asset to Formula 1 since they came back in 2001 and had been great competition for Bridgestone, but in fact they would end up only staying for another season before bowing out of Formula 1 altogether at the end of 2006. Michelin did announce in the aftermath that it would be giving compensation to all the fans that had bought tickets, and additionally it would buy 20,000 tickets for the 2006 race to give away to the fans that have attended the 2005 race. When you look at how Formula 1 is viewed in America today, it has come full circle. It took quite a long time for F1 to rebuild its reputation in the US, but when you look at the success of Drive to Survive, for example, it has now never been more popular. And with 3 races in Austin, in Miami, and now in Vegas, it seems that Formula 1 has finally cracked the US market and has firmly banished those memories of the most embarrassing race in F1 history. Well, there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed that little trip down memory lane. Be sure to let me know in the comment section what you made of the 2005 US Grand Prix. Were you watching it on TV? Were you even there? Also, if you are new around here, don't forget to like the video and please do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.